It feels like jobs are opening left and right. Yesterday it was Connell Maynard in Alabama A&M. Today Lee Hull joins Maynard in the unemployment line since he's been fired by Delaware State. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On family, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, aka the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean that the journey's over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter. @South Exclusives starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. And if you're new to FanDuel, put down a $5 bet. If that wins, you get $150 back in bonus bets. Just go to FanDuel.com to get started today. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Andrew Jones, the newest addition into the NCAA transfer portal. And I believe that Jones has an extremely high ceiling and could follow in the footsteps of fellow HBCU linebackers. In segment 2, we'll do our HBCU circuit. I told you, this would be very condensed today. We're only going to look at the teams that played over the weekend, because why would we look at teams that did nothing to update what we talked about last week? Instead, we're just going to keep it to the 6 teams that played in this final week of action, depending on who you're talking about. That being said, in segment 1, we're going to do our we're going to look at the Delaware State Overhaul. New head coach, new athletic director. Everything's different at Delaware State. You look at it, man. This is today when you're listening to this, it'll be Wednesday morning. On Tuesday afternoon, late afternoon, early evening time, you just saw a bunch of Delaware State news drop rapidly. Head coach fired. Athletic director steps down. New athletic director named. And this was all in a 20-minute span. This was insane to me. To have all of these updates happen in 20 minutes, to me, I was like, all right, something's got to be. Are we sure all of this is real? Are we sure that all of this information is verified? Because for you to go from an athletic director to a new AD in a matter of 10 minutes, I literally tell you, I kid you not. Mason Smith sent me the information. I said, I hope it's fake. You shouldn't be able to hire an athletic director that fast. I think that there was extenuating circumstances that we'll look at in the end of the segment, but I want to kick it off with Lee Hull, because on a principality level, right? If we're just looking at the principles of it, right? The principalities of this, Smokey, all right? This is something I don't co-sign. Firing a head coach after 2 seasons is something that I firmly stand against. I do not like the idea of that in general. The thing about principles, the thing about speaking in generalities is that you are not looking at context. You are not looking at each individual situation. So if I'm just speaking on all head coaches, yeah, I don't like seeing coaches get fired after year 2. I think unless you lose the locker room, or if you have some off the field situation that's completely different. But in general, I believe in giving coaches at least 3 seasons. But when you only win 2 games over the course of 2 seasons, not 2 each year, but 1 each year, I think things kind of change, because my first reaction was, I'll be really surprised. But those 2 years felt long. They felt longer than 2 years. So I didn't think that Hole had only been there for a couple of seasons. I thought he'd been there for 3, maybe 4. So I wasn't overly shocked, because Delaware State just has not had success. So I don't want to sit here and be stunned, but I will tell you that on a fundamental level, I just did not feel like 2 years is enough time. But what it likely is that you win 2 games over the course of 2 years, averaging 1 win a season, we don't feel like anything's getting better. Darian, we don't need to see a third year. We don't need you to get 3 wins in 3 years for us to realize that this isn't going to make the cut. We know what it is. We've seen it I would say year after year, but we've seen it for 2 seasons now. And the crazy thing is exactly how his last season at DSU transpired. Right? When you look at the beginning of Delaware State season, excuse me, it was a lot of belief. It was competing with teams. It was, oh, okay, Delaware State is looking competitive. And it's insane to me the way that did a complete 180 when they got to conference play. When they got to conference play, there was no more competitive games. They were getting worked. Like they were community punching bag when we're talking about conference play. Against the MEAC, everybody was putting up 30-something points on them. Everybody was shutting them down. Everybody was blowing them up. This is everybody that they're going against. All 5 teams. This is no exaggeration. They had one non-blowout, but everybody was putting points on them. And I speak in absolutes rarely. This is one where I can say it. Your defense was terrible. Your offense a lot of times did not stand up. So with that being the case, what is the reason to feel like Lee Hull was going to get better at Delaware State? I don't know. Maybe you do. But they obviously didn't, which is why they moved on. Now you get a new athletic director. And this was interesting to me because Alicia Shields Gadsden, she stepped down. 10 minutes later, they name another person immediately. Absolutely too fast, in my opinion. I still would have liked to have gone through an internal or an external search, excuse me. But you name the guy 10 minutes later. Tony Tucker is your new athletic director. This tells me a couple of things. One, the stepping down by Shields Gadsden was a legitimate step down. I know sometimes we see step down as a masqueraded fire. We like you. We respect you. We want you to walk out of this looking as good as possible. How about you say that I stepped down? It's funny because I think who was asked to do that recently? I can't remember who was asked to do that. But she stepped down and they said she wanted to pursue other things. And clearly that's true because 10 minutes later, they knew they wanted Tony Tucker and they hired from within. I feel like if you wanted that person gone, I'm not necessarily hiring from within. Right? Like, I think that's the difference. Excuse me. But I was concerned with the decision until I did a little bit of research and realized he was already on the staff. Him being already on the staff, Tony Tucker, A.D. Tucker being on the staff makes me question one thing. How much of the benefit of the doubt do the coaches who are currently leading their teams have? Because what I always say is that I guess this is more so of a new thing, but it's something I really started to believe and I've said more. When you have a new athletic director, the benefit of the doubt is gone. That I like you leash, gone. That we brought you in leash, non-existent. Because if I trust you enough to bring you in, okay, I seen something in you that I liked. So I'm going to hold on for me to see what I saw in the beginning. But if I'm an athletic director that didn't hire you, didn't go through the interviewing process, didn't have this tie to you, I'm going based off what I see. And if the results are, then if the results are bad, there's no, all right, we like this guy, we think he can bounce back, or we like her, we think she can bounce back. That doesn't exist anymore. So now A.D. Tucker could possibly, the thing is, you don't know how he feels. This is not like a professional front office where there's kind of an alignment of views for the most part with slight deviations. These are completely different individuals. He could have a completely different thought of the basketball coach or the soccer coach or the track and field coach. We don't know. So that's something to watch out for. I know I went against my principles by kind of co-signing the firing of Lee Hull, but I'm not going against my principles here. I stand on this. I do believe that everybody's going to have to be on their best behavior. Everybody's going to be on edge. Everybody's kind of on a hot seat of sorts. And for Tucker, he doesn't escape that hot seat. He has to hire a head coach immediately. And it's the football head coach, the biggest sport on campus. Boy, we don't envy him, but it should be interesting. The big first hire of the Tony Tucker era. As we push forward, let's do our HBCU storylines, or excuse me, our HBCU circuit, looking at the biggest storylines, the biggest things that went down over the weekend. I was going to put Delaware State in here, but then when they had the whole athletic director switch, I said, no, this has to stand alone. But let's go through the HBCU circuit as we continue with HBC, Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Better Together. Now, have you hated the team that you drafted in fantasy football? I know that I have. I'm absolutely terrible, and I've been bad for a few years. So you ever hate that team you draft, but you want to stay in the action? Introducing Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs, talent, and you can play with your friends and not against them. Pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategies, or strategize with your partners to boost your odds and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join the social daily fantasy movement at Better Together. It provides a sense of camaraderie and enhances the social experience of watching sports. Now, download Better Together download Better Together from the App Store and sign up using the promo code Locked On for a free $10 entry into any NCAA or NFL contest. Play with me in the Locked On CFB Saturday Games contest this Saturday. Remember the code Locked On, because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. I can't even lie about that. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Football. We're squarely focused on the CFB playoffs, expanding to 12 games, or excuse me, 12 teams for the first time ever. Let's see how this turns out. I think it's going to be very fun and very tricky. Who gets that second to last spot? Who gets that last spot? I think all of that is up in the air. We're going to do one segment of our HBCU circuit that we do weekly. This will actually be our last one. I'm not going to do one after the SWAC championship. I'm not going to do one after the Celebration Bowl. I'm just going to do recaps, right, of the one game that was played. This will make a return during basketball season at some point. At some point during basketball season, this will make a return, probably closer to conference play. But I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, FAMU, I saw a tweet by Kelvin Dean thanking Henry Burris for the opportunities to run the ball. And I saw everything I needed to see with just that tweet. I don't even think he has Twitter Blue. I don't think he even upgraded the amount of characters that he could type. It was a simple message expressing thankfulness. I don't know if that message was more directed by the thankfulness that Kelvin Dean had for the increased opportunities, or if it was a little bit of a shot at Joseph Henry. It was definitely both. I just don't know what the intention was. I'm going to choose to be naive, if you want to call me that. I'm going to choose to see the best in the situation and say that Kelvin Dean, was just happy with the fact that he got more touches than he was familiar with, and it paid off for him, right? They ran the ball pretty well for the second week in a row. So you can't blame them on that. I want to point out something that FAMU actually has done well this season, and that's bleed the clock. I think that FAMU has done a good job of playing situational football. I think that FAMU has done a good job when the game is on the line to rise up. I really do. And this was another thing that they did. You went 30 yards in 10 plays. So that's pretty good. 30 yards in 10 plays and took 6 minutes off the clock. You really went 40 yards, but you had a holding penalty that brought you back 10. But the point is, 10 plays. The plays before that holding, nothing but running plays and completed passes. That's going to keep the clock dripping. That's going to keep the clock dripping every single step of the way. So 40 seconds. When you have a small lead, you have an 8-point lead, they end up holding on to that. You want to drip the clock as much as you can. Going from, I think it was about 10 minutes left to 3 minutes left, it led to Alabama A&M getting the ball very few times in the fourth quarter. There wasn't many opportunities for them to come back from that deficit. They had to get it immediately, and they didn't. So I want to give that credit to FAMU, the ability to drip the clock. It's an underrated, or it's an underdiscussed skill, but it definitely exists, and the Rattlers possess it. Alabama A&M, it was a huge failure on their part to score or to make things happen in the red zone, near the red zone. Once you cross, really, I would say Alabama A&M's biggest problem this weekend, and we're not even going to touch on the Connell Manor thing, go back to yesterday's episode, but we're going to look at the action that they put on the field. Alabama A&M's biggest problem in the season finale against FAMU was their inability to deliver when they got in the plus territory. Let's look at it. They got 2 drives in the red zone, started it in the red zone, one at the 11, went 4 yards, field goal. The other one wasn't in the red zone, excuse me. It was at the 22-yard line. No yards on that drive, field goal. Then you look at 2 drives to where they drove down the field a little bit, got a little bit past midfield, near the FAMU 40 twice, back-to-back drives, interception. This is what you're playing with. You can't win that way. And then you settle it off with turnover on downs when you're inside the 20 twice. Doesn't work that way. Alabama A&M, this goes for anybody, but it happened with Alabama A&M. You will not win the game if you're given the ball in opponent territory in the 22 on the 22-yard line, on the 11-yard line, and you walk away with 2 field goals. You will not win if you get to the 40-yard line of your opponent and you throw interceptions on back-to-back drives. You will not win if you have 2 drives that get near the red zone and you have turnovers on downs. It just doesn't. That's 6 drives that you essentially waste. Can't get away with that, and they didn't. Now to their rivals, Alabama State, Kareem Key got his groove back in that last game. They were going up against the Tuskegee Turkey Day Classic, and I think that Key ended the season on a high note. What that does for him going forward, we'll see. I really do want to see what the spring season looks like for Key, because he'll have a whole year under his belt, essentially, of playing quarterback. We'll see what the QB situation looks like. Does Andrew Body stay? I don't know. We'll see what that looks like in the spring. But I think this gives Key a little bit of confidence, because you look at what he's done as of recent, and it hasn't been great, right? Like you wanted more, and they didn't give him a whole lot of opportunities. Like, he only threw the ball 9 times versus JSU. He didn't throw the ball that well the next game. So this game, for him to walk away with 331 yards and 4 touchdowns on just 18 attempts. So it's not like he flooded the streets with pass attempts. I think that this is going to go a long way for him. I think that he's going to benefit from this mentally as well. You got to look at Robert McMinn. Robert McMinn had over 150 yards receiving. He didn't have but one game over 100 yards all season long. That was 120 earlier in the year. So you're looking at the deep shots. You had longer plays. Everything was good. The passing attack for Alabama State, and I understand it was Tuskegee. I understand it was D2 competition. But confidence-wise, especially for Kareem Key, this is the best game that he's had since his debut versus Valley. So I think that this was really good for him. As for Tennessee State, this was a really tough loss for the Tigers, man. But they lost the biggest battle of the game, which was the run battle. They didn't run the ball well at all. Your 2 top runners both ran for 26 yards apiece on 6 attempts. That's already not a lot of attempts, and it's not a lot of yards. Meanwhile, you're looking at Montana. They had a 50-some-odd yard run for you to be able to close out the game. It's differences. And losing that battle, to me, was the key to losing the game. I don't believe that there was a route in which Tennessee State won the game where they got really beat up on the ground. I just don't think that was the case. The Montana Grizzlies, they won the battle in the trenches. Whether that was pushing forward for their own run game or stopping TSU's or getting after Draylon Ellis and sacking them 5 times, it didn't matter what it was. That's what they were about, attacking and asserting themselves on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And I think that they achieved that. So you got to kudos to them. Then you have Southern, and they just did what they needed to do to win this game. They ran the ball well. They made plays when they needed to. Grambling, they stalled out Grambling's offense. You know, I'm just going to go ahead and throw Grambling in here because I can't, man. I can't. There's less to say about Southern and more to say about Grambling because some of the issues you've seen with the Tigers repeatedly. Shout out to the Jaguars. They did their thing. Graves won another Bayou Classic. But you ever seen that clip? It went viral at some point where the kid hops off the bus and he tells his mom, terrible sandwich, by the way. And she gets it. She understands the message. he's just really terrible. You got to double down. That's how I feel about Grambling right now because that I told you on Monday, offense terrible. By the way, I gotta tell you again, it's really terrible. I don't know what they did well. I'm an optimistic person. I believe so. Depends on who you ask, but I think I'm a pretty optimistic person. I think I'm an upbeat person. I try to see the good in a lot of situations, right? But at the same time, there's no good to be found here. Grambling's offense didn't do anything well. I didn't like anything in their offense. Not the running game, not the passing game, not the protection. I didn't like any of it. Didn't like the quarterback play. It was all putrid to me. That's how I felt, man. And I feel this way because I'm starting to talk with my hands and clenching up, and I'm just being real about it. This was bad offense. This was bad offense. But more bad news. I wouldn't say the silver lining. I wouldn't say on a positive note, but Andrew Jones, the Grambling star linebacker, is entering the transfer portal, and this should come as a shock to no one. And I think he has a pretty high ceiling in it. Let's look at that in the history of HBCU linebackers in the portal as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. If you've ever been to FanDuel, you know exactly what I mean, man. You have NBA basketball, NBA, college basketball, NFL, college football. You have the NHL. You have the MLB, even though it's not in right now. You have futures. You can bet on who's going to win the next award. You can do, matter of fact, I know some people say, oh, man, I missed the game, the beginning of it at least. You have real live time stats too. Like you have everything you could possibly want. Teams, players, live action, before the game, futures, a variety of sports. It's really just pick what you want. And once you pick it, if you're new to FanDuel, you put down a $5 bet. If that wins, you get $150 back in bonus bets. So essentially, it's like a W on top of a W. Jameis Winston would love this type of situation. It's on you, though. You have to go to FanDuel.com to get started. Go to FanDuel.com, take advantage if you're new, and get the $150 back in bonus bets. Just go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. I believe Andrew Jones has a sky-high ceiling in the transfer portal. When you look at the talent that he is, I've never made any bones about it. I'm an Andrew Jones fan. I think that Andrew Jones is a fantastic player, and I see the way some of you switch up on your guys when they leave the HBCU ranks. I hear how some of you talk. He won't catch that out of me. I'm going to support Jones, and I'm going to look for him because I think that he has the talent to go to a G5, maybe even a Power 5, and still perform at a high level. Let's look at the history of this recently because there's been some guys who have done it. I think Bashul Tootin is the one that sticks out the most to have done it on a Power 5 level. He went from A&T to Virginia Tech, and he's looked really good at Virginia Tech. There's a chance that he actually gets drafted. That's what guys are looking for. We got to be real. We know why players are leaving the HBCU ranks. We don't like it, but we know about it, and it typically follows the same script. A really good season by Jones. Defensive player of the year, co-defensive player of the year, over 100 tackles, 20 tackles for a loss. He was a dominant force. I think that he has a lot of the abilities that we want to see out of today's modern linebacker. He's 220. That's a little light for me. I would like to see him, but I think he has the frame to get up, maybe be at a 230. If you can get to a 230, I don't know. He'll be a redshirt senior, so I don't know how much weight you try to put on him. You kind of want to take him as he is and add a little bit of weight. But if you get 225, 230, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I think the size of a linebacker in today's NFL is an often discussed thing, and it's no real exact number to it because different teams want different things. Like DeMarvion Overshown is balling right now with the Cowboys, and he's listed at 220. I doubt he's heavier than what he's listed at. So maybe a little bit, couple pounds here and there, but it's not nothing crazy. He's not 230 being listed at 220. So with Jones, I think he has all of the abilities. which is why I think he has a very high ceiling. He can be a guy who can cover for you. He can be a guy who attacks in zones. I think he can be a guy who you have an athletic. I've seen him do this. You have an athletic quarterback and he plays spy. He's a really good player. Andrew Jones is a really good player. And I think history lends itself to Jones because we talked about Tootin, and I think he's kind of the prototype of everything. But also the linebackers. BJ Davis out of South Carolina State. He left the Bulldogs. He was an all-conference player. And then he went on to East Carolina. He was third team All-AAC. That's a G5 school, a group of five, right? Then you look at Taekwon King out of North Carolina A&T. He left and he had a pit stop at Eastern Carolina, but he only played 3 games. He ended up keeping a red shirt that year and he moved on. He went to Temple. Taekwon King went to Temple and had the first 100 tackle season in 9 years since 2015. You're looking at his running mate at A&T, Jacob Roberts. He went to Wake Forest and had a solid year. He had about 83 tackles and 6 sacks. This is a good season. You're looking at HBCU linebackers who have been able to translate. I named 3. BJ Davis went from being an all-conference player at South Carolina State to being an all-conference player at East Carolina. Taekwon King, yes, he had another redshirt season when he decided to transfer from East Carolina immediately, but then he lands at Temple where he gets to play, works his way into a starting job, and ends up getting 100 tackles. First time that a player's done that at Temple since 2015. And then Jacob Roberts is an 83 tackle, 6 sack guy at a P5 level. I think Andrew Jones could follow in that suit. I really do think that he's that talented. I really am a believer in his talent, his ability to get behind the line of scrimmage, his ability to fly towards the ball if you're talking about some of the screens playing in the flats, and his ability to spy the quarterback. I think he has a lot of the aspects that you want as a linebacker. He has the athleticism. I think that he has the burst. He has all of it. I understand why he's making this decision. I hate it. I really do. I hate it, but I get it at the same time because it's everybody's same reasoning. And I think that he could land at a big time G5. I think he landed at a P5. Mo Carter and I was talking. I talk to Mo all the time. But Mo and I were talking about this, and we landed on Tulane. Jones is from New Orleans, Marrero to be specific. Let me show love, right? So going back home, going to Tulane, a G5 that honestly was in the mix for the playoffs, being a G5 is different than it used to be. It really is. If you can be a high-level G5, you can compete and you'll get a game against that P5 team, right? It's all about feeling like the competition you're putting on film is good enough for the NFL to respect. Tulane is going to get that done. I think that's a good stop for him. I would like to see him in Tulane, honestly, if he's not going to return to Grambling. So this is good. Another transfer portal guy, Jamari Taylor. This one hurts. I think this might be the most impactful and the most surprising of the transfer portal edition so far. I think we'll talk about that on tomorrow's episode, along with what happened the first time that JSU and Southern faced off as they prepare for their second showdown in the SWAC championship game. In the meantime, between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.